John had traveled many light years across the galaxy, visiting different planets and meeting countless species, but none of it prepared him for the quiet village on the edge of a distant moon. As he stepped off the small transport ship, the dusty roads and the worn buildings gave the village an ancient, almost forgotten feel. He had come to explore, to learn, but there was something strange about this place. The first thing John heard as he entered the village was whispers. The villagers spoke in low voices, looking over their shoulders as they talked. They spoke of Ella, a woman who had lost her husband many years ago. Her husband, a warrior of high status, had been known for his bravery and strength. But now, Ella was only known for her madness. She's just a mad widow, the villagers would say, shaking their heads. Ina had been a respected warrior, but his death had left a hole in the village. They said Ella had been a different person before his death. But since then, she had become obsessed with his memory. She would wander the village at night, staring into the distance, speaking to herself about strange things. The people did not understand her, and they kept their distance. John was different. He didn't see a mad woman when he looked at Ella. He saw someone in pain, someone who had lost her husband in a way that no one seemed to understand. He had heard the rumors, but John didn't believe the stories. He wasn't someone to judge, without knowing the full truth, so he decided to meet Ella himself. It was late in the afternoon when John first found her. She was sitting by a small fire outside her home, her face calm but tired. Her eyes, though, were sharp, like she had seen more than anyone else could imagine. John approached carefully, not wanting to startle her. "Excuse me, are you Ella?" he asked gently. She looked up, her expression unreadable. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft, but carried a strength that surprised him. "Yes, I am Ella, and you are." "John," he replied, sitting down a little distance away from her. "I'm new to this village. I've heard ... things about you. But I'd like to know your story, not from rumors, but from you." Ella was quiet for a moment, staring at the fire. John could tell that she was weighing his words. He wasn't the first person to come to her asking questions, but something in his tone made her decide to answer him. "My story?" She repeated, "People say I'm mad. I've lost my mind since my husband's death. They think I talk nonsense. But I tell the truth. I know what happened to him, and no one believes me." Now John nodded. He didn't speak, just listened. Ella continued, her voice growing more distant, as if she was reliving the past. "My husband, Ina, was part of something, something bigger than anyone in this village could understand. He was a warrior, yes, but he was also a protector of secrets he found, the things he saw. They were dangerous, more dangerous than the wars he fought in." John leaned in, his curiosity growing. "What secrets?" he asked softly. Ella turned her gaze to him, her eyes filled with both sorrow and something more, a kind of quiet knowing. "Before he died, he told me that he had uncovered something that could change the entire galaxy. He said it was too big, too dangerous for anyone to know. But before he could tell me more, he died, and the rest of the world forgot him, just like that. But I haven't forgotten. I know the truth." John was silent. He had heard the stories about Ella, about how she was obsessed with her husband's death, how she spoke of things no one understood. But now, hearing her speak with such conviction, he felt something stir inside him. There was something real behind her words, something that deserved to be uncovered. "Why don't you tell people?" he asked. "Why do they think you're mad?" Ella sighed, her eyes darkening as she looked back into the fire. "'Cause they don't want to know the truth. They've already decided I'm crazy. They don't care what I say. I've tried, I've tried to tell them, but they don't listen." John looked at her for a long moment. "I'm listening," he said quietly. "Tell me what you know. Maybe it's time for the truth to be heard." Ella's gaze shifted to him, and for the first time a small spark of hope flickered in her eyes. She nodded slowly. "You're the first one to listen," she said softly. "The first one who might understand, and maybe, just maybe, you can help me find out what really happened to him." The next few days passed in a blur for John. He found himself thinking more and more about Ella and her story. Each time he went to the village center, he could feel the cold stares of the villagers. They still whispered about her, calling her the Mad Widow. But John couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than anyone realized. John decided to visit Ella again. This time he came prepared, bringing with him some food and water. When he reached her house, Ella was sitting outside, staring at the sky. Her eyes seemed distant, lost in thoughts of the past. He sat down beside her quietly. "Do you mind if I sit?" John asked, breaking the silence. Ellen looked at him and nodded. "No, please, I've been waiting for you." John placed the food down on the ground between them. "I thought you might be hungry. I haven't felt hungry in a long time," she said, her voice heavy with sadness. "But I appreciate it." They sat in silence for a moment before John spoke again. "Ellen, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about your husband and the secrets he uncovered. What exactly did he find?" Ellen sighed deeply, her fingers tracing the edge of the wooden chair she was sitting on. "He told me something. Just before he died," she began, her voice soft. "He said that there were forces in the galaxy, powerful groups that were hiding things. Secrets that could change everything. Found one of those secrets, and it got him killed." John listened intently, his mind racing with questions. What was this secret? Why would anyone want to hide it? Ellen hesitated, looking down at her hands. "I don't know, he didn't tell me everything. Said I wasn't ready to understand. But he made me promise that I would find out the truth if something ever happened to him. I was supposed to search for the answers. But after his death, the villagers turned away from me. They think I'm crazy. They never wanted to help me." John nodded, feeling sympathy for Ella. He could see how much pain she carried inside her. "I believe you," he said softly. "I don't think you're crazy. If your husband found something important, then it's worth looking into. I'll help you." Ellen's eyes met his, and for the first time there was a spark of hope in her gaze. "You would do that? You would help me find the truth?" "Of course," John replied. "I can't just ignore something like this. I'm not sure where to start, but together we'll figure it out." Ellen smiled, a faint but grateful smile. "Thank you, John. I've never had anyone believe me before." The two of them began their search for clues. Over the next few days, John and Ella went through her husband's belongings, hoping to find something that would lead them to the truth. Ella had kept every letter, every journal entry, and every artifact that her husband had left behind. No matter how much they searched, there was no clear answer. One evening, as they were sorting through a box of old papers, John found something strange. A small faded map that seemed to lead to a location far outside the village. It wasn't a place that John recognized, but there was something about the map that felt important. "Ellen, look at this," John said, holding up the map. "This might be a clue." Ellen took the map from his hands, her eyes narrowing as she examined it. That. "This is the route he took on his last mission," she said quietly. "I never knew where he went, but I always suspected he had been to this place. It's deep in the mountains. No one goes there. But it could be where he found the secret he was looking for." John's heart raced. He knew this could be the breakthrough they had been waiting for. "Then we have to go there," he said. "It's the only lead we have." Ellen looked unsure. "But it's dangerous. The path is treacherous, and there are rumors about strange things happening in those mountains. No one dares to go near them." "I'm not afraid," John said with determination. "I've faced worse dangers before. If this is where the truth lies, we have to go." Ellen studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right, we have to try. But we'll need to be careful." The next morning, they packed what they could: food, water, and supplies, and set off toward the mountains. The villagers watched them leave, but no one tried to stop them. They had already decided that Ella's quest was nothing more than the madness of a grieving widow. But John wasn't so sure. He believed there was more to this story, and he was determined to uncover it. As they walked through the village, the air grew colder, and the trees thinned. The mountain path was steep and rocky, but they pressed on, determined to find the answers that Ella had been searching for all these years. With each step, John felt a growing sense of purpose. They were about to uncover something that had been Hidden for far too long, no matter what dangers lay ahead, he was ready to face them. The journey up the mountain was harder than John had expected. The path grew steeper with each step, and the air became thin, making it harder to breathe. The cold wind whipped through the trees, and the rocky terrain made every step a challenge.
But John and Ella pressed on.
They had no choice but to continue. "Are you okay?" John asked, noticing that Ella was breathing heavily. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice was strained. "I've been up here before, but I didn't think I'd ever come back. I never thought I'd be looking for the truth about Ina's death." John gave her a sympathetic look, but didn't say anything. They both knew this wasn't just a trip for answers. It was a journey to confront the past. They were walking through the place where Ella's husband had last been seen alive, and the memories weighed heavily on her. After hours of climbing, they finally reached a small, secluded valley hidden deep in the mountains. The area was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. It felt as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting. Ellen stepped forward, her eyes scanning the area. "This is it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is where Ina said he would find the secret." John looked around, trying to make sense of the place. The valley was empty, except for a large stone structure in the center. It looked ancient, like something from a time long forgotten. Vines covered much of it, but there was no mistaking that it was built for a purpose. It wasn't just a ruin. It had been designed with intention, and it seemed almost alive. "This place feels strange," John said, his eyes narrowing as he examined the stone walls. "Like something's hidden here, something that hasn't been touched in centuries." Nodded, stepping closer to the structure. "This is where Ina found it. He never told me exactly what he saw, but I know he was scared. He never came back the same, I think. I think the secret he found was too much for him to handle." John followed Ella, his footsteps echoing in the silence. "What do you think it is? What could be so dangerous that it killed him?" "I don't know," Ella said, her voice trembling. "But I'll find out myself." They reached the entrance of the stone structure. It was a large archway covered in thick vines. Ella hesitated for a moment, her hand resting on the stone before pushing the vines aside. The air inside was cool and musty. It smelled like the earth had kept its secrets hidden for years. They stepped inside, their eyes adjusting to the dim light. The walls of the structure were lined with strange markings, symbols that neither John nor Ella could understand. It was clear that this was an ancient place, one that had been forgotten by time, but there was something about the markings that felt ... important. "I've never seen anything like this," John said, running his fingers over the symbols. "This doesn't look like anything I've encountered before." Ellen looked at the markings with a mix of fear and awe. "This is it," she whispered. "This is what Ina was trying to protect." They continued deeper into the structure, following the winding path. The stone walls grew colder as they went further in, and the air became heavier. John could feel the weight of the place, as if it was pressing down on them, urging them to turn back. But neither of them could stop now. At the far end of the structure, they found what they were looking for: a large stone pedestal. On top of the pedestal lay a strange, glowing object. It was a crystal of some sort, but it didn't glow like anything John had ever seen. The light that it gave off was not bright, but soft, almost like it was pulsing with life. Ellen stepped forward, her eyes wide with shock. This is what he found," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is what he was protecting." John took a step closer, his hand reaching out instinctively. But Ella stopped him. "No," she said firmly. "We don't know what this is. We don't know what it does. But we need to know," John replied. "This could be the key to everything. If we're going to uncover the truth, we have to understand what this is." Ellen hesitated, looking at the crystal with a mix of fear and fascination. Finally, she nodded. "You're right. We'll have to know." Slowly, Ella reached out and touched the crystal. The moment her fingers made contact, the room seemed to shift. The air grew colder, and the markings on the walls began to glow with a faint light. The crystal pulsed, sending out waves of energy that made John's heart race. It was like the very ground beneath them was alive. Then, without warning, the crystal cracked, and a bright light filled the room. John shielded his eyes, but when the light faded, he could feel that something had changed. The air was still, but the feeling of tension was gone. It was as if they had unlocked something powerful. Ellen looked down at the crystal, which was now shattered into pieces. "What have we done?" she whispered. John could feel the weight of her words. They had found the secret, but in doing so, they'd unleashed something they didn't fully understand. "We've uncovered the truth," John said, his voice steady. "But the question is, what happens now?" The air in the ancient structure felt heavier now. After the crystal had shattered, everything seemed different. The pulsing light faded, but the strange feeling remained. John and Ella stood in the center of the room, both unsure of what to do next. Ellen's hand still hovered over the pieces of the crystal. She didn't know what to think. She had spent so many years searching for answers, and now she had finally uncovered something that might change everything. But what did it mean? John broke the silence. "Ellen, I know this is overwhelming, but we've found something big. Whatever that crystal was, it was important. We need to understand it." Ellen nodded slowly, but she still looked uncertain. "What if we've made a mistake? What if this thing is more dangerous than we realize?" "I don't think we can go back now," John said softly. "We've already uncovered something hidden for a long time. We need to figure out who's been keeping it hidden and why." Ellen took a deep breath and looked at the shattered pieces of the crystal. "You're right. You can't just walk away. If you know what's protecting this, then there's a reason. I need to know the truth for him, for all of us." John agreed, and together they began to carefully collect the pieces of the crystal. It was strange to think that something so small could hold so much power, but the intensity of the room told them it was true. After gathering the pieces, they left the structure and started their way back down the mountain. They knew they had to return to the village and gather more information, but they had no idea who they could trust. As they had made their way back to the village, John couldn't help but wonder about the implications of what they had just uncovered. Whoever had hidden this crystal, whatever it was, had gone to great lengths to keep it secret. And now they were caught in something far bigger than they had imagined. When they returned to the village, the atmosphere had changed. The villagers no longer whispered about Ella in the same way. They watched her closely, some with fear, others with curiosity. Word of Ella's return from the mountains had spread, but no one had dared to approach her. John noticed that even the most powerful figures in the village kept their distance. That night, they sat by a small fire outside Ella's home. John pulled out the pieces of the crystal and laid them carefully on a cloth. "I think we need to get these analyzed," he said. "I have no idea what we're dealing with here," Ellen agreed. "I've heard rumors of a scholar who lives near the capital. He's known for studying ancient artifacts. Maybe he can help us understand this." Nodded, but his thoughts were still racing. "Ellen, we've opened a door, but I think there are a lot more doors behind it. Someone doesn't want us to have this crystal. They're not going to let us just walk away." The next morning they set out to find the scholar. They knew it was a risk, but they had no choice. The knowledge they had uncovered was too important to ignore. As they traveled, John began to notice more signs that something was wrong. It was subtle at first, strange people watching them, whispers in the street. But as they neared the capital, the tension grew. They finally reached the scholar's home. A quiet building on the outskirts of the city. It looked ordinary on the outside, but something about it felt different. The scholar, an older alien named Torak, welcomed them inside, after explaining their journey and showing him the crystal pieces. Torak studied them closely. "This is far more than you realize," he said, his voice low. "These are not just fragments of a simple artifact. They are part of a weapon, a weapon that was hidden away for a reason." "A weapon?" Ela asked, her voice trembling. Torak nodded. "Yes, the power contained within these fragments could change the balance of the entire galaxy. It is not something to be taken lightly. The groups that have kept this secret, those that killed your husband, are very powerful. Do not want this knowledge to get out." John and Ella exchanged a look. They had known this truth was dangerous. But hearing it from Torak made it all feel much more real. "What groups are you talking about?" John asked. Torak paused before speaking. "The governing powers of this galaxy, the ones who control information, resources, and influence. They have kept the existence of this weapon hidden for centuries. Anyone who finds it is either silenced or erased from history." Ellen's heart sank. She had known that something bigger was at play, but the weight of Torak's words made everything feel overwhelming. "But why was Ina involved?" Ella asked, her voice breaking. "Why did they kill him?" Torak looked at her with deep sympathy. "Your husband was a protector, Ella. He was part of a group that fought to reveal the truth. He uncovered the location of the weapon and knew what it could do. He died because he was getting too close to exposing everything. He was protecting you from something far darker." John could see the pain in Ella's eyes. She had lost her husband, but now she understood why. And yet the truth they had uncovered only ought more questions. "What happens now?" Looking at Torak. Torak's face was grim. "Now, you must decide whether you want to continue down this path. The people who control the galaxy won't stop until they get what they want. And if they find out that you have this weapon's secret, they will come for you." Ellen stood up, determination filling her eyes. "I have to keep going. I've come this far. I'll never stop until I know the truth." John stood beside her, ready to face whatever came next. They had uncovered the first part of the truth, but they both knew this was just the beginning. The decision to move forward felt heavy. John and Ella had uncovered something dangerous, something that could change everything. They had learned about a weapon powerful enough to shift the balance of the galaxy. The people who controlled that power would stop at nothing to keep it hidden. But despite the risks, they knew they couldn't turn back. The truth had to be revealed. After their conversation with Torak, the scholar, John and Ella began to make plans. They knew the next step was clear. They had to find more pieces of the weapon and stop whoever was trying to keep it from the world. But that wouldn't be easy. The people who had hidden the weapon would be hunting them. They decided to travel to the capital city, where they might find more information about the weapon's location. Torak had told them that the truth was buried deep within the highest levels of power, where secrets were locked away behind layers of deception. If they were going to find out more, they needed to be careful. The journey to the capital was long and tiring. The roads were crowded with travelers, merchants, and officials, and the closer they got to the heart of the city, the more tense things became. John noticed the way people looked at them, the whispers that followed their every step. It was as if they were being watched, even though no one ever made a move to approach them. When they finally arrived in the capital, the city was even more overwhelming than John had imagined. Towering buildings reached for the sky, and the streets were bustling with activity. But despite the lively atmosphere, John felt a sense of unease. There was a heaviness in the air, as if something was just beneath the surface. Waiting to explode, Ellen had brought them to an old library in the city, a place known for storing ancient texts and records. It was a quiet, hidden spot, far from the eyes of the public. She had heard rumors that the library held information on the weapon secrets that the governing powers had long since tried to bury. John and Ella hoped they would find the answers they were looking for. Inside, the library was dusty, with rows upon rows of old books and scrolls. The walls were lined with shelves, and the air smelled of old paper and wood. Ella walked confidently through the aisles, her footsteps echoing in the silence. This place used to be open to the public, Ella explained as she led John deeper into the library. But now, only a select few have access. Those who can afford to pay for the truth. John followed closely behind, scanning the shelves. "And you think we'll find what we need here?" "I hope so," Ella replied. "This is where Ina spent a lot of his time. He found clues here. Maybe we can find more." They reached a small, isolated section at the back of the library. Ella stopped in front of a shelf, running her fingers along the spines of the books. She pulled out an old, weathered book and handed it to John. "This is it," she said. "It's the records on the ancient weapon. I've seen Ina look at this before. It's the key to everything." John opened the book carefully, scanning the faded pages. The text was in an ancient language, one that neither he nor Ella could fully understand. But as he flipped through the pages, he noticed a familiar symbol, one that had appeared in the markings inside the stone structure. "That's it," John said, pointing to the symbol. "It's the same as the one we saw back at the temple." Ellen leaned over his shoulder, her eyes wide. "That's the symbol of the weapon. It's part of the old empire, an empire that's been forgotten for thousands of years. But the weapon it controlled wasn't just a tool for war. It was a device capable of bending time itself." John blinked. "Bending time? What do you mean?" Ellen nodded. "The weapon wasn't just about destruction. It was meant to control the flow of time, to change the past, to shape the future. Whoever controls it can rewrite history." John felt a chill run down his spine. He had known the weapon was dangerous, but this was something entirely different. If someone with bad intentions got their hands on it, they could change everything. They could erase entire civilizations from history or create new ones that never existed. "We have to stop this," John said, his voice tight with urgency. "This can't fall into the wrong hands." Ellen nodded. "I know. But first we need to know where the rest of the weapon is hidden. We have to find the other pieces before they do." They spent the next few hours combing through the ancient records, searching for clues. They learned more about the weapon and its origins. It had been created long ago by a powerful group of beings who had ruled over the galaxy. But when the weapon had been misused, it had been hidden away, its existence erased from history. As they read, they also discovered something else. Someone had been tracking them. There was a hidden message in the book, a warning that anyone who sought the weapon would be hunted down. The message was clear. The people who controlled the galaxies. Power would not let anyone threaten their secret. John and Ella exchanged a look, knowing they were now in even greater danger than before, but they couldn't stop. The truth had been revealed, and they had to see it through to the end. "The next step is clear," Ella said, looking at John. "We need to find the remaining pieces of the weapon. But we have to be careful. There's no telling how far they'll go to stop us." John nodded. "We'll be ready, whatever it takes." And so, with the weight of the galaxy on their shoulders, they prepared to face whatever came next. The search for the truth had only just begun. The city was quieter now, and the weight of the mission settled heavily on John and Ella. They knew they had to find the remaining pieces of the weapon before those who wanted to keep its existence hidden could stop them. But the truth they had uncovered was more dangerous than they had ever imagined. If they failed, the consequences could be far-reaching, affecting not just the galaxy, but the very fabric of time itself. As they left the library, the sun had already begun to set, casting long shadows over the streets of the capital. They had a plan, but their time was running out. The knowledge they had gained about the weapon's power wasn't something that could stay hidden for long. The more they searched for answers, the more they realized that someone was already watching them. John could feel it. The eyes on them as they walked through the city, the faint whispers in the air. There were people who knew they were close to uncovering the full truth, and those people would do anything to stop them. "We can't stay here for long," John said quietly as they walked through a narrow alley, keeping to the shadows. "No," Ella replied, her face tense. "Now we need to find out where the other pieces are hidden. Can't let them keep this secret any longer." John nodded. The journey they had begun was no longer just about uncovering a hidden weapon. It was about stopping those who controlled it from rewriting the galaxy's history. The pieces they had gathered so far were just the beginning, and the path forward was unclear, but they couldn't stop now. As they walked deeper into the city, Ella turned to John. "I've been thinking. There's someone who might know more about the weapon. Contact Avena, someone who helped him in the past. If we can find them, they might know where the remaining pieces are hidden." "Do you know where to find them?" John asked. "There's an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city," Ella said. "Ina used to visit there. I think his contact is still in hiding. If we can find that person, they might have the answers we need." John thought for a moment. "Let's go. Don't have time to waste." The two of them made their way through the city, avoiding crowded streets and staying out of sight. They passed through a series of alleys and side streets, Finally reaching the warehouse Ella had mentioned. It was an old building, worn down by time, with broken windows and rusting metal doors. No one had paid attention to it in years. John and Ella approached cautiously. Ella reached into her bag and pulled out a small silver key. She unlocked the door, and with a quiet creak, it opened. The warehouse inside was dark and cold. Dust filled the air, and the faint smell of old wood and metal lingered. "This is where Ina and his contact met," Ella whispered. "We need to be careful. There could be traps, or worse, someone watching us." They moved quietly through the building, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The shelves were covered with old crates and boxes, some of which looked like they hadn't been touched in years. But as they searched, John noticed something unusual, a faint light coming from the back of the warehouse. He motioned for Ella to follow him. They made their way toward the light, and soon they found a small room hidden behind a stack of crates. Inside, an old terminal blinked with a faint green light. Ella approached it carefully. "This is it," Ella said, looking at the terminal. "Ina used this to communicate with his contact. If the contact is still alive, they might have left a message here." John stood guard while Ella worked quickly, typing on the terminal's keypad. The screen flickered, and after a few moments a message appeared. Ella read it aloud. "The pieces are scattered. Keep the secret safe. If anyone finds the pieces, they will come for you. Trust no one." Ellen paused. "This is from Ina's contact, but it's not enough. We need more information." Suddenly there was a loud noise from outside, the sound of footsteps growing closer. Someone had followed them into the warehouse. "We have to go," John said, grabbing Ella's arm. Now, they rushed out of the small room and back into the main part of the warehouse. The footsteps were louder now, and John could hear voices. They were not alone. "We don't have much time," John whispered. "We need to get out of here before they find us." Ella nodded, her face pale with fear. She knew that whoever was after them wasn't just trying to stop them, they were trying to silence them. They'd come too close to the truth. John and Ella ran toward the back exit where they had entered earlier. But as they reached the door, it slammed shut, blocking their way. They were trapped. Ellen turned to John, her eyes filled with desperation. "What do we do now?" John quickly scanned the room. There had to be another way out. "Follow me," he said, pulling her toward a window high up on the wall. "We can climb out through here." He grabbed a crate, stacking it under the window, and helped Ella climb up. She reached the window, pulling herself through, and then helped John follow. They were outside in seconds, running into the dark streets of the city, breathing heavily. They ducked into another alley, their hearts racing. John could hear footsteps behind them, but they were fading. They had escaped for now. "We have to keep moving," John said, looking around to make sure they weren't being followed. "We can't stay in the city. We need to find the next piece of the weapon." Ellen nodded, but she could see the fear in his eyes. They were being hunted, and the more they uncovered, the more dangerous their journey became. But they couldn't stop now. The truth was out there. They were the only ones who could find it. The night air was cool and calm, but John and Ella felt anything but at ease. After escaping the warehouse, they had run through the city's streets, staying in the shadows, avoiding any pursuit. Their lives were in danger, but they couldn't stop now. The pieces of the weapon were out there, and they needed to find the last one before the people chasing them could reach it. "We've been running for hours," Ella said, her voice filled with exhaustion. "Where are we going now?" John stopped. For a moment, scanning the area around them, the city had become a maze, and every corner felt like a trap. But they had to keep moving. They couldn't afford to be caught. "We need to get out of the city," he said, his eyes focused. "Know a place. It's a hidden safe house. We can regroup there and figure out our next move." Ellen nodded. She trusted him, even though the danger was growing with each step they took. She knew they couldn't let the weapon fall into the wrong hands, and if they stopped now, everything they had uncovered would be lost. They walked through narrow alleys, avoiding the main streets and sticking to the shadows. It wasn't long before they reached an old unmarked building on the edge of the city. John unlocked the door with a key he had kept hidden and gestured for Ella to enter first. Inside, the safe house was simple but secure. There were no windows, and the walls were thick, offering protection from any prying eyes. It was a place of refuge, somewhere John had come to when things got too dangerous. Ellen sank down onto a small cot, her face pale and tired. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. You're getting closer." John stood by the door, looking out through a small crack. "I know, but we've come this far. Can't give up now." He walked over to the table where the pieces of the crystal lay spread out before them. They had gathered the fragments from the mountain temple, and now they needed to figure out how they fit together. The pieces glowed faintly, pulsing with an energy that made the room feel alive. Ellen joined him at the table. "This is it, John. We're so close." John nodded, his eyes fixed on the pieces of the crystal. He had a feeling that once they put the pieces together, the final piece would reveal itself. But how? He couldn't explain it, but something told him that the crystal had more to offer than just power. It held the key to unlocking the mystery of the weapon. As they worked, Ella spoke again. "You know, I've been thinking, Ina. He always said that the weapon wasn't just for destruction. It was meant to change things. It could change history. But maybe he was wrong. Maybe we're not supposed to control it. Maybe it's meant to be destroyed." John looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. "That's what we've been trying to do, isn't it? We've been trying to stop the wrong people from getting it. Maybe the real goal is to make sure no one gets it." Ellen's voice was soft but full of emotion. "I never thought it would come to this. I wanted to know the truth, but now that we've uncovered it, I don't know if I can live with it. The power that's locked in these pieces, the power to change time itself, it's too much for anyone to control." John's gaze softened as he met her eyes. "We'll figure it out. Together, we have to make sure the weapon is destroyed so no one can ever use it again." For a moment, they just sat there, in silence, as the weight of their mission settled over them. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. But they couldn't afford to give in to fear. They had to see this through. After some time, they finally managed to fit the pieces of the crystal together. It clicked into place, and the entire room seemed to hum with energy. A bright light suddenly filled the room, blinding them for a moment. When the light faded, a small compartment had appeared in the wall beside them. Inside, there was a single, perfectly round crystal, glowing brighter than any of the fragments they had seen before. Ellen reached out and carefully picked it up. "This is it, the final piece." John looked at her, his heart racing. "What?" Now Ellen held the crystal in her hands, feeling the weight of it. "Now we finish what we started. We destroy it." But before they could act, the sound of footsteps echoed from outside the safe house. They weren't alone. Someone had found them. "They're here," Ella whispered, her voice tense. John quickly grabbed the crystal from her hands and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "We have to get out of here." They rushed to the back door of the safe house and ran into the alleyway. The footsteps grew louder, and John could hear voices shouting in the distance. They had no time to waste. He needed to find a way to get rid of the weapon before their enemies could take it from them. Ellen looked at John, determination in her eyes. "We're not going to let them win. We'll make sure this weapon never sees the light of day." John nodded, his resolve as strong as hers. "Let's go. We've come too far to stop now." As they sprinted through the dark streets of the city, their path ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear. They would stop at nothing to ensure. The weapon was destroyed, and the galaxy's future remained safe. The final piece of the puzzle had been found, but their journey was far from over.